The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. And look at us, just being a bunch of bums refusing to go into the office. But we're kind of, everyone, we're getting a hang of it. We're getting a hang of it. Again, good morning, Off the Bench. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissa, Elliot Rearing. Gentlemen, good morning. Off and rolling here on a Wednesday.
That's right. Victory Wednesday. Usually only get Victory Mondays. They don't play games on Tuesdays. But vibes are high today.
That's right. Miami, Ohio with a big win.
That's right.
Big win last night.
Action, baby.
Gotta love Maction when it's all said and done. But we'll kick off the show with some headlines from Elliot coming up here in a moment. The trade deadline came and passed yesterday when we woke up and found out that the Bengals made a move for only the third time in the last 50 years at the deadline. There were reports that the Bengals were being super aggressive and pursuing some help on defense. Obviously, that ended up, it's not that they didn't try. They ended up not being able to close the deal on a move for the defense. We'll get to that shortly. The playoff rankings revealed last night. What did we learn? We'll get to that shortly as well. Plus, a little buy or sell. And that includes Jermaine Burton, the Bengals as a whole, little Joey Votto, Reds action. We got a lot to dive into here today. So let's kick it off. We'll send it over to Elliot with Elliot's headlines.
Oh, yes. All right. So I presume there's no headlines sounder, but that's okay because we don't have a studio.
That's right. That's right.
Last night was the start of Maction, as I kind of mentioned. We had Miami, Ohio. They beat Ball State 27-21. Ooh, yes. Bowling Green took down Central Michigan 23-13. Going into college basketball, because why not? There were no good games yesterday, not a single one. But nonetheless, I'm going to read down some of the scores. You ever hear of Cal Maritime? California Maritime? You ever hear of them?
I've not.
No. It sounds like a school that the big schools pay to come in to just get an ass whooping to kick off the season or tip off the season.
Well, it's even worse than that. It's a school that a little school paid to come in and get their ass kicked because Sacramento State beat Cal Maritime 106-44.
Good for them.
So good for them.
Sac State, baby.
Another Cal Poly. Cal Poly, they lose to San Francisco 86-78. Just having some fun. Washington, they've got a basketball program. They beat UC Davis 79-73. Idaho State, similar to Idaho, but with a state at the end, they lose to Arizona State 55-48 in a battle of wits. Then you had BYU. They beat Central Arkansas, not the West, not the East. It's Central Arkansas, 88-50. How about that? Also, you had Kansas State playing New Orleans, 89-65 there. And finally, I'll do one more because who cares? Kennesaw State beat Toccoa Falls 110-61. Welcome to the beginning of college basketball season, everybody. How about that?
It's big time.
Okay. Big time, yeah, big time. Moving on to the NBA. The whole league was off yesterday. The whole league did not play a game yesterday. But we have Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, and I saw Kinner tweet this, and I very much laughed at it. Joel Embiid has been suspended 3 games without pay for shoving Philadelphia Inquirer columnist. How about that? So the guy who outwardly doesn't want to play now doesn't have to at all.
Yeah, good for him.
That'll teach him.
You can't be investigated for resting your players when they're not hurt if they're suspended for shoving reporters. So maybe this was a big brain play by Embiid to save the Sixers that next $100,000 fine for sitting him out because you knew he wasn't going to play in these next 3 games. So they're against good teams. So this might have been a workaround.
That appears to be what's happening for sure. NHL news, for those of you who care about the NHL, I'll read a couple because why not? Our local team, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they fell to the Sharks. Ooh, the San Jose Sharks. 2-1 in overtime. Alex Wenberg goes coast to coast to give the Sharks the victory. The Canucks beat the Ducks. That rhymed. Kraken and the Avalanche, they squared off yesterday. The Avalanche, Casey's Avalanche, shout out to them. The Natural Disasters, they win 6-3. The Blues, they beat the Lightning. The Hockey Club of where are they? Hockey Club of Utah. They lose 3-0 to the Jets. Shout out to Winnipeg, they're 12-1. And then finally, you have the Hurricanes beating the Flyers as the final goal was scored in the final minute. So good for them. And that's all the headlines because there were nothing.
And there you go. I don't know if you guys saw this. I saw this yesterday too. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, of course, he's addressing the media. He was asked about play calling, and he goes, "I love play calling. If I took a head coaching job, I would want to be a play calling head coach." And of course, people have jumped all over that. And I know, look, I'm assuming, and look, Zach Taylor, we're not talking about Zach Taylor losing his job, but Ben Johnson's going to get a job as a head coach next year, right? Like, I was surprised he didn't get a job this year. Everyone was surprised that Mike Vrabel didn't get a job. Everyone was surprised that Bill Belichick didn't get a job. To me, the biggest surprise was Ben Johnson. It's not that he didn't get a job. It's that he really didn't heavily pursue it. He accepted a nice little increase in pay with the Lions and stuck around. But yeah, when I saw that clip, I thought right away he's going to probably be the hottest head coaching commodity in the free agent market after this upcoming season, especially with the way the Lions have been playing.
Almost certainly. The Lions, no doubt, the team to beat in the NFL right now. Certainly the best team in the NFC. I got to give the Chiefs their due. As long as they're undefeated as back-to-back Super Bowl champions, they'll certainly be near the top of that list. But I don't think anyone's playing nearly the same level of football as the Lions right now on both sides of the ball. The run game's been great. They just added an edge rusher thanks to Cleveland's and Darius Smith there. They're getting stronger on defense, even without Hutchinson. And with how they're looking right now, I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions make the Super Bowl. And it was reported that Hutchinson could possibly return if they make it that far, which would be absolutely insane. And that defense would get a massive boost, even if he's not 100% healthy. How much would that mean to the locker room to just have that kind of leader back out there strapping it up with the team? I know if I was on that team and seeing Hutchinson jog back on the field for the Super Bowl of all things at the end of the season after that gruesome injury, it would mean a lot and everyone would play a lot harder. So it would be really, really cool to see that. The Lions look great. It was reported last offseason that Ben Johnson was interested in coaching Caleb Williams with the Bears, and he was waiting to take that Bears job if they were to fire Matt Eberflus. That's why he didn't heavily pursue the Seahawks job, or pardon me, I'm forgetting the other one he was connected to, but the Seahawks job was the one that he was really connected to, and then they went with Mike McDonald because he wanted to focus on getting that Bears job. Obviously, they didn't end up moving on from Eberflus, but with how the season's gone so far, I would be shocked if Eberflus gets another chance, which would mean 3 straight rookie quarterbacks drafted by the Bears with the old head coach coaching in year 1 and a new head coach in year 2. Not a recipe for success. The Bears continue to not learn from their mistakes, but if I had to guess right now, that's going to be where Ben Johnson ends up after this season.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're the Bears, you have to be kicking yourself too, because I mean, look, you look around the league, any teams that have defensive-minded head coaches, and I know Washington's going to really kind of be, the people will use that as an example, but a lot of teams with offensive-minded head coaches, especially with elite quarterbacks, that seems to be the key to success in today's NFL right now. Why the Bears were stubborn in this particular situation, especially if they could have gone after Ben Johnson, that's what doesn't make sense to me. And look at where the Bears are at. You see the capabilities in Caleb Williams. You see the talent that's taken over in Chicago. There's something to work with there, but you basically just wasted a year of Caleb Williams. Now, can they still make the playoffs, continue winning games moving forward? Yes, but it doesn't feel like a throwaway year in Chicago, but it doesn't feel like a year that it's all going to come together. And it's not because of the talent on the field. I just think there seems to be something off with the coaching perspective. I think Ben Johnson and the Bears make a ton of sense this upcoming offseason.
Absolutely. I think the Bears, it's exactly what we talked about with the Bengals if they were to move off Zach Taylor. If you have that elite quarterback, and obviously Caleb Williams hasn't proved nearly as much as Joe Burrow, but obviously the pedigree as a prospect, that's the kind of guy coaches are looking for in the offseason when they're taking new jobs. That's why the Chargers, with such little talent on their full roster, were the most advantageous job for a new head coach this offseason, and Harbaugh ran to it, is because of Justin Herbert, and getting an elite quarterback is so hard to come by.
All right, Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissa, Elliot Rearing with you guys here. Elliot, you brought up a little bit ago the Joel Embiid situation. Did you guys see? So the reporter he shoved, Chris Haynes, I believe is his name. He said, don't bring up, I guess his brother had passed, and he mentioned his brother in an article recently. And basically in a way that, I was trying to look for the article to get the full quote, but basically saying, questioning his desire to play. He has been quoted, Embiid, in the past of saying that he does this, he plays for his family and he plays for his brother. But he says, if you say that, why aren't you playing? I thought that's what led to the altercation between him and Chris Haynes. Kind of a wild thing to put in a column. Usually you hear those types of crazy things like from an opinionated sports talk show or something along those lines, which I'm not saying that's okay, but to actually put it in writing and to actually publish it, I thought that was pretty wild. I'm not saying it was okay to shove the reporter, but definitely I could see why he lost his temper a little bit.
I don't know what you want reporters to do, because when you come out and you say you're not going to play back-to-backs for the rest of your career as 30-something, and he's outwardly saying that, you have to question whether or not he wants to play. He still hasn't played a game. So I don't know what he expected what he expected the reaction to be. If you care about your health, that's great. If you want to get out there and play, but you're worried about your injuries, I guess that's fine. But you can't be mad at people for questioning your integrity when you outwardly say, I'm not going to play back-to-backs ever again. There's 82 games in the regular season. There's no reason that you shouldn't be playing at least 70 of them. There's no reason. Not in today. You play 3 games a week? 3, maybe 4 games a week in the NBA, and you can't suit up. I don't get it. I don't get the NBA. I don't get how this is still a thing. This is still an ongoing issue, because the more this is accepted, the more the Joel Embiids of the world are going to win these arguments with their teams, with their franchises. Hey, I'm going to be hurt in a couple weeks if you keep playing me hard, so just bench me. I'll take a rest, and we'll see in the playoffs. The more this trends this way, and I know the ratings in the NBA have plummeted to start this season. It's been one of the worst rated NBA seasons maybe ever. And now you go on to this Joel Embiid thing, and it's like when you're coming out and saying this, we all know you don't want to play. So this reporter was writing it down. I'm not saying he has to blame the brother or I didn't even take it like that too. I really don't. I really didn't even take it. If Joel Embiid's saying he's going to go out there and play for his family, but you're still not going to play, I don't know what else he's supposed to do. Yes, you have to ask questions. That's the job of the journalist.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think that line, that little shaky line in journalism, is obviously when you ever get into family. And that's kind of when we see these bubble ups from professional players, it usually is resulting in some kind of comments made about family or someone that's not associated with the sport they're playing or the issue they're discussing, going a step further and talking about, the brother or the mother or the father or whatever. That's when professional athletes usually get mad and we see these altercations. I mean, we just saw it over the weekend with Jason Kelce smashing the phone at Penn State. That's someone making fun of his brother, and then he took it, pretty harsh and reacted in such a way that, I personally thought was just fine with the way that video transpired. So it's certainly, everyone takes family to a different level, and I didn't read the comments made by the journalists, and obviously I don't know the whole situation, can't speak for Embiid himself, but yeah, it certainly does seem like he took it in a certain way, and I don't know that I can necessarily blame him when it comes to family, because that is always such a touchy subject. You don't know what everyone, has gone through with those relationships or anything along those lines.
Yeah, again, in the quote that got people's attention too, when Joel Embiid said, the next time you bring up my dead brother and my son again, you are going to see what I'm going to do to you, and I'm going to have to live with the consequences, he says. So yeah, that's I wouldn't want a guy that size threatening me like that, but
right. Right.
Nonetheless. All right, we have a ton more to get into. We're going to get into the Cincinnati Bengals. The trade deadline got off to a fun start yesterday. Right off the bat, Bengals fans started their day with, of course, the Bengals addressing a need on the roster, and it was kind of reported throughout the day that they weren't done, that they were going to continue addressing needs on the roster. Ultimately, no deals were done. How does that make you feel, Bengals fans? We'll discuss that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Oh, look, we're back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing, back with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Again, excited to be with you here on a Wednesday. Let's talk a little Cincinnati Bengals. The trade deadline yesterday was kind of weird. You wake up right away wondering if the Bengals are going to make a move at the deadline, something they've only done less than times 2 to be exact before yesterday, times that they've made a move at the deadline in almost 5+ decades. And to kick off the day, knowing that the Bengals were not just going to sit there and do nothing, that they made a change. They had Herbert, the running back from the Bears, to the running back room, of course, with Moss's injury, so they had to address that. And then reports kept coming out that they weren't done, that they were going to continue to look to add help on the defense, most importantly or notably the defensive line. I know, Jake, earlier in the day when we were doing the show, Marshawn Lattimore was a piece that I thought made a lot of sense for the Bengals. Be aggressive, go instantly upgrade at that key position. An experienced, talented player would instantly make that defense better. But a lot of people have said, including you, even if you have a talented secondary, you're not going to get the most out of it when you can't get to the quarterback. And it sounded like they were aggressive. They were trying to get some help on the D-line. They ultimately didn't get it done. Now it's led to a lot of mixed reaction. Some saying, hey, they appreciate that the Bengals were trying, but ultimately they didn't get it. And others were saying, I'll believe it when I see it. Right. Now accusing the front office of dropping the ball and potentially ruining what could be a special season for Joe Burrow and this Bengals team.
I think both stances there I completely understand. This team, until yesterday morning when they traded for a backup running back, had only made 2 trades in the last 53 years in the history of this franchise when it comes to in-season moves. So to not believe that they were actually active when they yet again didn't make any meaningful moves, I don't know that I could necessarily blame fans for having that stance. Personally, I'm going to believe that they tried because it was reported more than it's ever been reported. As soon as Khalil Herbert's trade was announced, it was instantaneously reported with everyone as that was rolling in that the Bengals were not done, that they were on the phones calling about edge, calling about interior D linemen. Even with about 15, 20 minutes to go until that 4 p.m. Eastern trade deadline, Diana Rossini tweeted that the Bengals were on the phone with interior D linemen across the league trying to make a move for a pass rusher. I believe that they were trying. I think that might just be a choice on my end because it would certainly be a hard pill to swallow if they were not. I think this whole trade deadline situation would actually be easier to stomach as Bengals fans if they just hadn't made a move again. I think waking up to that Khalil Herbert trade at 8 a.m. or whatever it was, everyone, myself included, was all in the same boat of, holy cow, we're really going to go for this. We're going to make 2, 3, 4 moves today and really bolster the holes of this team. And then to only see it be Khalil Herbert, who's a guy I'm really excited to have in Cincinnati, a piece that we needed to have. We only had one running back that was worth a damn after Zach Moss's injury. So you had to go out and get another running back, but I wanted a few luxury trades. We only did the necessity trade, and that seems to be what the Bengals have done over the last 50 years. The Carlos Dunlap trade, one of those 2 in-season trades before yesterday, was because he forced his way out of town. And then this one is because our other running back breaks his neck, basically, and is going to be out for the season. The Bengals don't make moves to fill holes. They make moves because they're forced to. And I think that's a shame because after yesterday morning when they made the call to Chicago, I really thought that they were changing the tide and going to do something that I hadn't seen in my lifetime.
My question is, if you have the ability to dump off 7th, 6th, hell, even 5th round picks, why not do it? You know, if you take a look at who the Bengals have drafted in those rounds, with a couple of exceptions, those picks have amounted to nothing. So why? And I know they did it yesterday for Herbert, a 7th rounder. A 7th round pick in the NFL is essentially useless. It's nothing. It's not. And again, I'm not a big draft guy like Jacob. But I look at like who teams pick in those 7th rounds. It's like punters and maybe the world's biggest flyers.
You are right. Like as soon as you get out of 6 and 7, that's when you start having debates about whether the picks are worth more than the players. 6th and 7th round picks, swapping them for starters or even players that are going to contribute a little bit, usually is a great move.
It just for me, it doesn't make sense why the Bengals didn't do it, especially this season when you desperately needed help defensively. It was what I thought it was yesterday. It seemed like a move that, it was born out of necessity because you lose Zach Moss for an extended period of time. You need somebody to fill that gap. But I also do think it was just one of those things, we're going to make a trade just so we can say we made one, and then we're hanging up the phones and we're all going home. I think that's truly what it was. I think they had a plan to get a backup running back, and they had no plans to add a defensive player via trade. Because I was just looking at what some of those guys were traded for yesterday. Why are you not putting and maybe teams don't want to deal with the Bengals. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But there's no reason you shouldn't be throwing your hat into more rings than what the Bengals did. There's no reason for it.
I think the two trades that were made that I have circled and ones that I wish the Bengals had been on the receiving end of: Josh Uche, the edge rusher from the Patriots, to the Chiefs for a 6th-round pick, a guy that's been incredibly productive this year on a 1-year contract, so it wouldn't affect the books too much. And then a guy who's a pending free agent going from Denver to Arizona, Baron Browning, a guy that kind of fits the mold of who the Bengals would attack in free agency. He's a pending free agent. He's a young guy coming off his rookie contract, has kind of exploded in the last year and a half, 2 years. He's from Ohio State. He's a local guy. He has been productive in his NFL career as an edge rusher, and I think he's a guy the Bengals will definitely be interested this offseason. I would have loved to flip a 6th or 7th round pick to Denver for him. I think the one thing that is important to focus on as we talk about this trade deadline and how it shook out for the Bengals: every single big name player that was circled for the Bengals to trade for, with the exception of Marshawn Lattimore, was not moved. It's not like the Bengals sat on their hands while other teams were seizing up the Max Crosbys and Jeffrey Simmons and Myles Garretts of the world. Those big name players, the one trade that we thought was going to be the one piece, if we could get one player to turn this defense around, that level of player simply was not moved. So I don't know that the Bengals necessarily thought that trading for mid-level and depth pieces would raise the floor of this team enough to make it make sense. I'm not justifying it. I personally think it would have to trade for depth. But since those big name guys weren't on the market, I just wonder if the Bengals didn't think that the little moves would mean enough to this team this year and to hold on to those for the future, because we do have a lot of holes on this defense. And maybe having 2, 3, 4 draft picks instead of 2 players is going to be better in the long run if those players can't affect the team this year. I don't know. I'm trying to find spin zones to make it feel a little bit better, but I don't know if you can slice it any way other than being a little bit of a disappointment on the trade deadline. The last point I wanted to make, one guy that everyone has kind of had circled for the Bengals in the offseason as a free agent, and then now at the trade deadline, it was probably going to take a 7th-round pick to get him if you're going off what other guys had been traded for. Calais Campbell, the interior D lineman in Jacksonville. Something interesting to note about him: only $700,000 against the cap. So something to think about there. Would that be great for the Bengals to add? Absolutely. What's the Jaguars' incentive to get that money off their books? It's not saving them anything. You're losing production out of the middle, and you're getting a 7th-round pick, which we both just agreed isn't really worth a whole lot. I think that's another thing to operate with here too, and I know we talk about it a little bit more with MLB and with the Reds and their trade deadline and stuff along those lines, but it does take 2 to tango, and I think a lot of the players the Bengals were targeting simply were not on the trade block, and whether they were on the phones and found out about it too late to pivot their plan, or guys were moved while they were in discussions with other guys, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm choosing to believe that they were active this trade deadline, just because I don't know what to think if they weren't.
So for me, I would look at it, and again, if this was my team, I would be more annoyed with the Bengals' lack of activity the last 3 weeks versus yesterday.
I think that's
mainly
fair.
Because you sat back, you watched the Bills, who were winning games, and didn't just sit on their hands and say, well, we won't make a move until the deadline because we're winning games. Like, they made a move. You saw the Jets make a move. You saw even the Chiefs, who were undefeated, making moves. I think, and this is my take on not just the Bengals, but any team. I hate when teams wait right up into the deadline day to make a move, because that's when you're battling everyone at that point. The Bengals were fighting everybody who was going after a pass rusher or someone in the secondary yesterday, to where maybe you could have kicked the tires on some of these weeks before. Now, maybe they did. But again, the second that you watched other teams make urgent moves, the Bengals should have been actively looking to make a move. I don't know how much credit I give them for the move yesterday at the running back position, only because, yes, you needed that, but you're kind of just right back where you started, a team that really can't run the football and a team that can't stop the football. So that's why I would have felt better had they maybe not addressed the running back position yesterday, but got an average pass rusher at least to show that they tried to at least do something. Maybe they did. Obviously, they didn't get a deal done. At the same time, with the Bengals, at some point, deals have to get done. It can't be, well, we almost got a deal done with Jamar Chase. We couldn't get a deal done with T. Higgins. We couldn't get a deal done. At some point, deals have to be done, and that's extending guys, signing guys in free agency, which they have done, to be fair, and obviously being aggressive at the deadline. Who knows? But the bottom line is, this is it. There's no more help coming. This is your product now the rest of the way. So with that being said, with what's left after the deadline, the Bengals are who, in your opinion, and are they good enough to overcome their deficiencies, to ultimately do what the expectations were coming in, win a Super Bowl?
Win a Super Bowl? I don't know if I saw what I needed to see to believe in that. I do think the point that you made that we're back to kind of square one, if you will, on offensive personnel is a great point, and I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly where we're at. But the one thing I do want to pose, how far below square one were we without Zach Moss and without Khalil Herbert? That's a massive, massive step back with just those two running backs, Travion and Chase Brown in the backfield, and then practice squad Kendall Milton on the active roster now. That is a really, really big step back for a team that already can't run the football. Having only one running back getting all those carries, that puts you in a near impossible spot. So I think getting back to square one is a much, much bigger step forward for the Bengals than a lot of people are giving them credit for, because the injury to Zach Moss knocked them back significantly. However, I think that trade keeps them where I wanted them to be with that Zach Moss injury in terms of getting in the wild card. I don't know that I've changed my tune on division or Super Bowl or anything big picture like that.
No, for me, it's and by the way, Kenner said you don't give him a whole lot of credit for yesterday's move. I give him no credit because they didn't do anything. They did what they were supposed to do. When you do your job, you don't get really rewarded. That's just how the world works. You needed something, you got it. This is how you operate as an NFL franchise. You don't get a pat on the back for trading a 7th round pick for a 4th string running back. It's just not how the world works, unfortunately. I think Khalil Herbert's a fine running back. I don't mean to knock that guy, but it's what else was there to do? You had one move. The Bengals had to make it, or else the team would be significantly worse. So they don't get a pat on the back for me. As far as what are the Bengals as of this moment, I don't think anything has really changed. The team was never going to be a run-first team. They never will be a run-first team as long as Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor are here. It's just not how the world's going to operate. So saying that, yeah, the run game stinks. It has to be better because the pass game gets opened up from the run game. You can use play action. You can open up the playbook a little bit more. Saying that, I don't think this changes anything. I think we're in the same exact spot as we were. But despite all of it, you've won 4 out of your last 6 games. The 2 losses being to playoff teams in the Ravens and the Eagles, both birds, just for the reference. And I think that if you come into Baltimore on Thursday and you win, then we can start talking about those expectations we had before the season. But as of right now, at this very second, we're not there yet. We're not the Super Bowl team. We can barely see the playoffs in the back of our minds. That's kind of where we are, and you're just trying to fight. Every week's going to be a fight. You're going to have to score 40. Defense is going to give up 30.
Yep,
just how it's going to be. And that's who the Bengals are. That's where they are. And for the record, I would have liked to see a defensive player added. Does one defensive player fix this entire defense? No, it does not. And how much effectiveness would he have had in a terrible defense? Who knows? I would have just liked to see the effort. When you see at least the effort, nobody can get mad. And unfortunately, you gave everybody hope with the signing of Herbert very early on in the day, and then nothing happened after it. So now it's almost like that move didn't even happen. So continue on, roll on. Hopefully Herbert is better than Zach Moss. This is no knock on Zach Moss, but he very quickly was not good enough to be the starting running back in Cincinnati. Very quickly we found that out. Nothing against the guy. I like Zach Moss a lot, but he just wasn't good enough. Hopefully Khalil Herbert can be a step above that, and we'll go from there.
Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us here today on a Wednesday. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Reacting to the trade deadline, the fallout from it. Now all the teams, they have their roster set, and it's off to the races from here as far as that goes. And again, the Bengals, they make a move. They address the hole at running back yesterday due to Moss's injury. They get Khalil Herbert from the Bears. Many were expecting a move on defense. That didn't happen. But the bottom line is this team still has people engaged. They still have people locked in, curious, even with the deficiencies. They're still good enough to win football games. They're right there in the thick of it with everyone else. I think that's what makes it disappointing they didn't add, but also at the same time, it's not as if this team has no shot moving forward. It's just disappointing they didn't do it. What about, so you look at the team they played Thursday night, and they made a trade at the deadline yesterday and I think they have very similar issues as the Bengals. They have not really issue. They have the same strengths and the same weaknesses. Their strengths are the same, but they look different doing it. It's their offense. I mean, the Ravens, their identity is wild. It used to be the identity of the Ravens was their defense. Now the identity is their run game with Lamar Jackson / of course, the big dog when it comes to what they could do on the ground, but they can't stop anybody. All right. When you have Derrick Henry and Lamar doing all the work on the ground, it's complemented by a very good passing attack this year for Lamar. So kudos to him for that. They can't stop anybody. Very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals. They can't stop anyone either. But the Ravens go get a Tre'Davious White, former two-time Pro Bowl cornerback. That move does what for you? Is that a good move for Baltimore? And again, at least they send to their fans, hey, we know we're not very good. We actually have the worst passing defense in the NFL, but we had to get somebody. We had to do something because I think fans would have been disappointed in them had they not tried to address their biggest need at the deadline as well.
I think a lot of people are overhyping the Tre'Davious White move off name value. I think it was a great move for the Ravens to get a guy who's a former All-Pro who's going to be cut by the Rams after this trade deadline for nothing. They swapped 7th-round picks this year to the Rams, next year's 7th-round pick from the Rams going to the Ravens with Tre'Davious White. So they didn't lose anything in this trade, and they gained a guy with some significant upside. So I think it was a great trade along those lines. The people that are blowing it up like he's going to be their number one corner and play at an All-Pro level, we haven't seen that from Tre'Davious White in a long time. In all honesty, we haven't seen Tre'Davious White on the field for a consistent period of time in a long time. So I don't think it's going to move the needle a ton for that Baltimore defense, except if it energizes the guys that are already in that room and tells them the front office believes in this defense, adding one piece they think can get it over the edge, and those guys start playing at a higher level, which is absolutely in play and is part of the reason why you go out and make these in-season trades, is to bolster that locker room. And we heard Joe and Jamar echo that sentiment in their press conferences yesterday with the Khalil Herbert trade. It does mean something to the locker room when the front office gives you a vote of confidence by adding something to the team in the middle of the season. The Ravens did that for basically free twice with Deontay Johnson from the Panthers to the Ravens. They didn't lose much, if anything, and then a pick swap with the Rams. So 2 big-time additions for the Ravens at 2 positions of need without giving up a whole lot. That's what good franchises do. You attack those things at the end of the trade deadline, and you fill those holes with high upside plays without losing a whole lot, and that's why the Ravens have been a winning organization for a long, long time.
How about the Steelers? They finally, they fulfilled their
right.
lifelong destiny of getting a receiver through trade. They end up pulling off a trade. They get Mike Williams. That's a nice veteran addition to their wide receiving room. I don't know. I mean, it makes them better. I don't think it makes them significantly better. They're already a good football team. I like them over Baltimore with the Russell Wilson that we've seen as of now. But I do like that move for Pittsburgh. Good for them. Yeah. They add another veteran in their room with a veteran quarterback now. The Steelers have a much different look and vibe than what we thought they would have coming into the season.
That's right. Really, everyone's playing at a high level in Pittsburgh. And I don't know. I certainly didn't think this was going to happen, especially with Russ coming in for Fields. I thought that was a bad decision when it was made. It turns out to not have been, because he's playing at as high a level as we've seen him play at in some years now. And really the rest of the Steelers are starting to play at a much better level too. I mean, even Najee Harris is running harder with Russell Wilson at quarterback. At least it seems. George Pickens' production has taken a massive step. This defense continued to add as well, getting Preston Smith from the Packers for a 7th-round pick to pair him with Highsmith and TJ Watt. It's a really exciting team with a lot of really good pieces, much to my chagrin, but I think they're legit.
All right, good stuff. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing. Oh, Elliot, no, my bad. Tag you in.
I was just going to ask, do you really think the Steelers, as of this moment, you would favor them to win this division over Baltimore?
I would.
I just think they're the most complete team. Now, Baltimore, I think, is going to get the rub by a lot of people because I think they're more flashy with Lamar and Derrick Henry. And to be fair, I've always kind of taken shots at Lamar's passing game. It's actually probably the best passing season he has had from an efficiency standpoint. I think they're the most electric offense in the North right now just because the balance of the pass and the run. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, I'll take that tandem any day. So I'm just saying I think the Ravens are more flashy right now and explosive. They have that more figured out. But their defense is so bad, I can't pick the Ravens over the Steelers. I think the Steelers' offense isn't as explosive, obviously, but I think they're more balanced across the board, especially when you add in the part of the game that we never talk about, special teams, defense, offense. The Steelers, unfortunately for all of us, are the complete package in that division.
Yeah.
What don't you like about that? What are you kind of hesitant on?
Well, I think it's still one of those things where, do we really trust Russell Wilson to be this guy the rest of the season? They've played the easy part of their schedule. This is what we were talking about before the year. Yep. And you can't, as of right now, which is what you guys are saying, which is probably fair. It's as of right now, I think they probably are the better team overall. But I think you're about to face a gauntlet in the back half of this schedule, and we'll find out who the Steelers really are here. You play all your divisional games. The Browns aren't a walkover with Jameis Winston. They're not good, but they're not a walkover. And outside of that, you still have Eagles, you still have Chiefs. There's a lot of hard games with the Steelers coming up. The Ravens have proved that they're able to win those games. The Steelers, I don't believe, have. So I don't think out of the 6 Steelers wins, I don't know how many truly great wins they have this year, opponent-wise. That's the only reason that I'm still hesitant, is because I don't believe they've truly played a ton yet.
How many wins do you think wins this division? Just quick exercise.
11.
You think it takes 11? So you're saying Baltimore gets to 11? I don't know if Baltimore gets to 11. I think that's my thing. Because if the Steelers have to win 11 games, I don't know that they're going to get there. But if they split with Baltimore and take care of Cleveland, I think they're sitting really, really pretty to win this division. Yep. And that's not a huge ask, especially depending on what the Bengals are. I mean, we know the Bengals are a week-to-week team here. They have 2 weeks against the Bengals. Week 18, if they're playing starters, I don't know how that's going to go in Cincinnati, especially if the Bengals are playing to get into the playoffs. That's going to be an absolute rock fight to end the season. So they're going to have to take care of the Bengals in Pittsburgh, if I had to guess. It certainly is an uphill battle with this back half of the schedule, but I don't know. Unless Tre'Davious White can turn around this Baltimore secondary, I just don't see a way that they win a ton of these games down the stretch. I think it's going to be very, very close. It might come down to those divisional games, those head-to-head matchups, but I think right now I would have to favor the Steelers.
Look at how Cleveland the way Cleveland beat Baltimore a few weeks ago is because Cleveland's defense is good enough to slow down the Derrick Henry / Lamar Jackson attack. And then because of the deficiencies on defense, it allowed Jameis and the Browns to all of a sudden look like an explosive offensive team. And I think that there's something in there with that, but I don't think they're as good as what they looked against Baltimore. When Pittsburgh goes head-to-head with Baltimore, that defense is going to bring out the best, of course, in Russell Wilson and Pickens and now Mike Williams and, of course, Najee Harris in the run game. And Steelers defense is going to give enough resistance to Lamar in that run game to where I still like Pittsburgh in those head-to-heads as far as that goes. Plus, Steelers can go 4-5 the rest of the way. They could lose 5 games the rest of the season and still finish at 9 to 10 wins on a bad back half. So we'll see what happens. But the North definitely is entertaining in a way we did not anticipate, but here the Steelers are the team that we were all adamant. Not only would they not make the playoffs, they would finish in last, and Mike Tomlin's 500 streak would come to an end, and here he is, probably going to win the division. Who knows?
Yeah, of course, right?
All right. That's how it, exactly. Annoying, remember? That's how we've always chalked up the Steelers. Yep. Annoying. All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube and ESPN 1410 Wingham and Dayton. We got a little buy-sell coming up around the corner. The 12-team college football playoff rankings came out last night. And while it wasn't as entertaining as I thought, I tried to convince myself that I would actually really care. And they came out, and I'm just like, so now what? Now what? No one's really screwed over. No one's really robbed. No one's really anything. I mean, what are we going to talk about with that?
There's one team I think was grossly underrated.
Grossly underrated. Okay.
Only one.
So we'll get to that. Let's get to that. Let's get the college football reaction out of the way, and we'll close out with buy or sell on the radio side. But, a little college football playoff reaction, kind of what we expected. Obviously, the division leaders at the top, Indiana, where they were placed, were Ohio State, Notre Dame, and others. What did you guys think? We'll get to that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right. Welcome back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here on 1410 ESPN Radio. This is what we'll call a little, a touch and go segment. So we'll get fully into the college football stuff coming up here in a moment. But I do have to ask, Elliot, are your arms sore? I know you had to do a lot of push-ups yesterday.
No, it's just a wrist issue. It was always a wrist issue. It's not an arm issue. It's a wrist issue. This ground in my room here doesn't really complement my wrists. And they are a little bit sore. I thank you very much for asking about that. It was a little bit of a problem, but we're getting through it, and together we prosper.
Well, there you go. I mean, look, I was kind of worried. I woke up in the middle of the night worried about your wrist, worried about, how you were feeling.
Thank you.
I'm glad you made it through. We might do more push-ups today.
I don't think so.
It means a lot. It means a lot that you said that. No, I will not be doing any more push-ups probably for the year. Real quick, I guess since this is a touch and go, we'll do a little quick ad read if that's all right with you, Kinner.
Let's knock it out.
Champions Grill. We will be back. We've taken a 2-week hiatus because of Halloween last week. Champions will be back tomorrow. So tomorrow night, 7 p.m., leading up into the Bengals game, I will be there live. I don't know who else will be with me live, but we will have somebody with me live at Champions Grill at 7 p.m. So if you have got nothing coming on, if you got nothing going on, if you want to stay and watch the Bengals game, I will be there for the entirety of it. We're live from 7 to 8, but I'm just going to sit there and watch the game for the remainder of the time. We do also have the actual stream that Jacob does.
That's right.
for the entirety of the game. So once the YouTube is done with the live show, we will then kick you to Jacob's show. Jacob will be doing it for the entirety of the whole game, as he's done every game this season. And then obviously it'll be a post-game show with Craig afterwards. Yep. So that is what you have looking forward to tomorrow regarding Chatterbox Bengals and everything like that. So you got nothing coming on, come out to Champions, 7 p.m. to 8. I'll be there for the entirety of the game. If you can't make it, tune in to watch Jacob and Craig. Jacob will be live for the whole game on YouTube, and then they will do a post-game show. Craig will be live with them after. So that's what we got tomorrow. Just a heads up for everybody.
And there's some questions in the chat whether or not we'll be doing back-to-back Champions Grills. We will not. Back to every other week starting this week on. So we're going to be off next week, and then we'll start that schedule back up as we had done for the start of the season. That'll line us up with the Bengals' second Thursday Night Football game as well. So we'll be able to do this kind of mega show thing twice. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yes, Craig also mentions in the chat, Champions Grill with an E, Work Road with an E. If you're curious where Champions Grill is, it's with an E.
There you go. With that, again, you have the Bengals Ravens tomorrow night, and I look, we focus so much on the trade deadline and kind of how they looked against the Raiders, but how are we feeling heading into this? I mean, obviously you lost the last one and at home, and you got to go on the road. What do you guys think of Joe Burrow kind of basically not really calling out the NFL, but just kind of poking at a weird scheduling quirk, bringing up the fact that, this is the same week, the same night, the same matchup as far as home and away teams go as a year ago at this time, where Joe Burrow unfortunately had the season-ending injury at Baltimore. I didn't really look into it a whole heck of a lot, but he seemed to have receipts because he had that one pointed out, as well as Aaron Rodgers back in week one. Very similar. Something there? No, I didn't think it was a big deal, but he seemed to have an issue with it.
I actually noticed this when the schedule came out, that it was Thursday Night Football in Baltimore, same week. Definitely a conscious choice by the NFL, right? None of us believe that this is just some kind of coincidence to throw the Bengals in Baltimore on Thursday Night Football the same week. But I assume he's had this game circled for the whole season since week 10 of last year. I mean, we all know the chants that were chanted at the Thursday Night Football post-game show right after he got hurt on the field. So I would imagine that he's really, really excited for this one. Hopefully it goes the right way, and I think he's going to do everything in his power to make sure it does.
Yeah, I would say I'm a little bit nervous for the game. I think I'm glad that we just beat the Raiders as confidently as we did, and we only have 4 days. Usually, again, I said it yesterday, I usually don't like the Thursday night games, but having to build on this momentum that we have as of this very second, I think that helps a lot. As long as we walk away with no injuries tomorrow, I feel great. Speaking of injuries, we could do a quick update on the Bengals practice injury log as of yesterday's practice. A lot of injuries. Zach Moss and Eric all were transferred to the IR, freeing up the roster spot for Khalil Herbert in that trade. Still one open roster spot for the Bengals. Would expect some kind of practice squad elevation before Sunday. Jordan Battle was on the injury report along with Chase Brown, though both were full participants in practice. Orlando Brown, after not practicing on Monday, was limited yesterday. So a good sign that he's at least trending towards trying to play this week. That would be a massive, massive get for this Bengals offense to have him back. Really don't know a whole lot about his injury. It's one of those that we're just monitoring week to week. Don't know what could happen there. Obviously a flare-up this last week that caused him to miss time, but we were expecting to have him back for this last game against the Raiders, so it would certainly be nice and on schedule for him to return for the Ravens game. Burrow on the injury report, as he has been all year long, but full participants both Monday and Tuesday. T. Higgins still has not practiced. In his press conference yesterday, Jamar Chase seemingly slipped up and said that T. Higgins would not be playing this week, so
Take that for what you will, but it seems like the Bengals would potentially be without T. Higgins again this week on Thursday Night Football against the Ravens. B.J. Hill has not practiced this week. Sam Hubbard was upgraded from limited to full yesterday, so it seems like he's going to play. And Geno Stone has been limited the entirety of this week. So a lot of things to watch for the Bengals as we get ready for this big-time game against Baltimore. A lot of injuries to key players as we try to get healthy down the stretch, because we all know how much injuries mean to this Bengals team. We saw how big of a step back that defense took when the defensive line was injured early in the season. Hopefully everyone can get back healthy and start to make a difference.
We never got to...
One thing...
Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to bring up the fact that tomorrow's kind of wild because, like, they beat the Ravens. I think Joe Burrow's right back in the MVP conversation. Yep. The Bengals are right back. I think now the Bengals, because people view the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Bills as the class of the AFC, and the Steelers in that mix as well. The Bengals are still viewed as that team battling it out with the Jets and all the teams with high deficiencies. I think they beat the Ravens tomorrow. What that creates narrative-wise is the Ravens would have lost three straight? Have they lost? What's their? No, they just won. They pummeled the Broncos, but they would have had quite a few losses. That put them at 5-4, while the Bengals would be at 4-5 on the season. All of a sudden, 6-4. All of a sudden, the Ravens don't look as unbeatable. I mean, that's 4 losses in your first 10 games. Obviously, I don't think they're as unbeatable, and I don't think teams fear the Ravens the way they have in years past. I think the narrative completely shifts on the Ravens tomorrow, and completely shifts in Bengals' favor. Obviously, if they get the win, but a win. I know some win. Look, the Raiders' win was big, but it didn't change the outlook of the season. A win over the Ravens, that completely changes it, because that immediately catapults the Bengals back into the upper echelon of teams like the Chiefs, like the Bills, and even the Steelers at that point. So tomorrow, a lot more is on the line than just a division game, because I think it's really about the perception of the Bengals and even Joe Burrow's MVP status when it's all said and done.
Everyone's talking about that Joe Burrow MVP status. I think there's another award that we should be taking a little bit of a focus on if the Bengals are able to get this win against Baltimore, because we know record matters for all those awards, but Trey Hendrickson now leads the league in sacks. And I never thought that he was going to have a chance to be the Defensive Player of the Year, because I think Defensive Player of the Year is incredibly reliant on name value. And I think TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons before his injury this year, those guys just have such a more powerful name than Trey Hendrickson in most households across the country. So I figured that they would have the inside track on that award. But with the production he's putting up and how much everyone has been talking down on this Bengals defense, and really everyone's taking note that he is the only player on that side of the ball that's worth a damn for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's producing at an unbelievable career high level. If he's able to get 20 sacks and the Bengals sneak into the playoffs with the run that they're required to make to do so, I think he's absolutely going to finish near the top, if not at the top, of Defensive Player of the Year, right there with Joe Burrow in the MVP conversation.
100%.
Yeah,
I was going to real quick. I was going to say, Jacob, we never really got to talk about Eric All.
Yeah.
Eric All has been, I think, one of the, like, you talk about this Bengals season has been so disappointing. Eric All has been one of the bright spots. I think this could have been a guy, or at least still can be a guy, that is our tight end of the future. I think I had that hope coming into this year, and he's vastly surpassed every expectation I had. He's been great at blocking. He's been efficient catching passes. And to have that injury happen to him sucks so much. I didn't know it was the same knee. I didn't know it was the same knee where he tore that ACL prior, and to have that happen to him, it's really unfortunate. I'm hoping that he's going to be able to come back from that and be the productive player that he's been this season. But I will say, if he's not able to, and this is a brutal injury for Eric All, he was absolutely phenomenal this season. We couldn't have asked for better play out of him whatsoever.
100%.
I forgot about that injury too. There's so much going on and overlapping, and then of course Monday not on. I forgot all about that. That is very unfortunate, considering the season he was having and the trajectory, of course, that you guys just mentioned. Unfortunate, because
it is interesting to look at. It's interesting to look at this Bengals draft class, and it feels like going down the list, there were a lot of risks taken on a lot of these picks. And for the first few weeks of the season, it looked like, and especially the preseason in Burton's case, it looked like all those risks had been worth it, and we were gonna reap the rewards of every single one of those picks. Now, in his second start, we saw Amarius Mims get carted off the field with a calf injury. Injuries were always his concern. He was able to return, hasn't missed time since, dodged a bullet there. Eric All, injuries were his concern. Now we see early in his career an ACL injury to the same knee he had repaired in college. Jermaine Burton, his concern was character issues, and now they've obviously reared their head. Now he's been inactive for a handful of games so far this season. McKinley Jackson was injured coming out of college, and he missed the first 4 weeks of the season. Chris Jenkins had a club on his hand, missed the first 2 weeks of the season. All of these draft picks this season we took risks on. Some of them are paying off, and if Eric All is able to recover from this injury and play solid football for the rest of his career, that risk can still pay off. I'm not saying it hasn't. Maybe Jermaine Burton locks in, and that risk can still pay off. I'm not saying it hasn't. I'm just saying right now, this far into the season, looking back at this draft class, a draft class that I have been basically checking off as a massive win for this organization the entirety of this year to this point, I'm a little bit worried that all of those risks are already starting to pop up.
That's a very good assessment. You're right. I remember, of course, I'm always critical, but I was critical of the draft for the Bengals because it wasn't a question of the talent that they got. I just have said that the Bengals' recent success, to me aside, I don't think the Bengals are a good enough organization to take as many risks as they did with as many picks as they made. It just seemed like every draft pick that we were assessing after the draft, it was, oh man, they took this guy, but there was red flags here, there was red flags, and you're right, all those red flags are coming to fruition here, not even, at the halfway point of the season. Again, that doesn't mean the big picture that everything's out the window, but it didn't take long for some of those red flags to start waving so early. But we'll get into more of that coming up later on in the show. We appreciate everyone hanging out with us here this afternoon. Again, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll step away for a few moments. When we come back, reaction to the college football playoff rankings that came out last night. Again, with the election going on, with the trade deadline reaction and the 12-team playoff reveal, college basketball, night 2 of the season. So much going on. It was hard to keep up with everything, but we're going to dive into the playoff reveal when we come back. More Off the Bench next. You know what I learned from Elliot, being a former radio guy himself, what I found interesting is that you can, a touch and go is radio lingo. You can call something a touch and go. It doesn't mean that it's a touch and go. I mean, I don't think a touch and go was supposed to go 15 minutes, but hey, you know what? Here we are. That's totally fun, but I got to get.
You can't drop Bengals draft class questions on me in a touch and go. That's not how this works. You guys have to know this.
Yeah, Kenner. You had like 7 questions in the chamber there. I was going to do the ad read, and we could have ended it there, but you're like, no, we got a whole segment to do. So that's okay. We're here. We're here for you, buddy. We're here.
Oh, at no point was I passing blame. I'm just laughing because you could call something a touch and go. It definitely does not mean that it is nonetheless. But all right, let's get to it. The 12-team college football playoffs reveal came out last night. And what I was curious about was how they were going to do it, with teams 1 through 4. Were they going to just rank the division leaders and then stack everyone behind, as like when they do that with the final one, all the conference champions will be at the top. So that's what they did. BYU out of the Big 12, Oregon, Miami of the ACC, Georgia and the SEC. There you have it. Again, Oregon came out number 1. No surprise there. Then you have Miami, who got the 3 nod, BYU at 4, and Georgia 2. So there's your 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then that's where everyone started reacting after. But no surprise there with how they ranked those division winners at the top, or division leaders at the top in 1 through 4.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's kind of the expectation. A lot to be made of where that 4th division champion was ranked, though. BYU, the 4 seed, but they were ranked 9. Boise State, just 3 spots behind them at 12. Certainly interesting to say, because I know it's been said a lot that those 4 byes are guaranteed to the Power 4 champions. That is not true. That is not the case. It is the 4 highest ranked conference champions, regardless of conference. If BYU loses a game, does not finish this season undefeated, Boise State's only loss is to Oregon. There is absolutely a chance that regardless of who the Big 12 champion is, or even if Miami doesn't win the ACC at undefeated, we could see BYU as that 4th highest ranked conference champion and the Big 12 champion not get the bye. Certainly something interesting that I don't know that a lot of people are focusing on.
When you look at, sorry, I didn't know if Elliot was going to pop in. My apologies.
No, you're good.
But yeah, like Overall, I mean, again, a nitpicky thing here, and this is why I don't like the 12-team playoff, because there's so many teams involved, and at the end of the day, no one's out anything. I'm laughing at the graphic that I have in front of me that, the first team out is SMU, and the second team out is Texas A&M. This was exactly the point and the concern about the 12-team playoff, is no one is passionately advocating that SMU and Texas A&M should be in the playoff. Like, whoever's the first team out and the second team out, no one's going to give a rip about those programs. There's programs that are at the back end of this at the 12 and 11 spot where I'm like, I don't really care about those teams, because some of those teams are on life support as well when it comes to the playoffs at this point. But when you look at teams 1 through 4, Oregon being at number 1 doesn't surprise me. Georgia at 2. You put Miami at 3, BYU 4. Okay, cool. But where people started to really get critical, of course, was how they started to view Indiana. Indiana, Tennessee, that would be the opening round, the first round matchup, which would be pretty wild to see Indiana have to go play at Tennessee with this explosive offensive Indiana. Everyone seems to be really pulling for the little guy, the Indiana Hoosiers. I am curious, were they the team that you were saying was disrespected, Jacob? Is that the big glaring red flag from last night's rankings reveal as far as how the committee told us they valued or devalued the Indiana Hoosiers out of the Big Ten?
Not one bit. Not at all. I think Indiana is ranked exactly where they belong, if not maybe a little high. I think 8 is absolutely the ceiling for where Indiana should be. They have not beaten anyone this year. Their schedule is absolutely terrible. They haven't beaten a single ranked team. They haven't played a single ranked team. This is a football team that's taking care of business, and they absolutely deserve their credit. But we don't know how good Indiana is until this Michigan and Ohio State game this coming weeks. I know Michigan is not what they normally are, but playing that team is always going to be somewhat of a struggle, at least in the trenches. So we'll see how they fare this week. And then obviously when they go to Ohio State, they're going to have a chance to beat the number 2 team in the country. And if you win that game, you'll be ranked number 1. So all the Indiana fans that are mad at being number 8, complain about the schedule you've already played, take care of business, and it'll solve itself. The team that I think is grossly underrated, and the fact that they're below Indiana is absolutely comical to me, is BYU. BYU has done everything that's been asked of them this year, winning every single game on their schedule in a much, much harder fashion. They've played good teams. They have 2 ranked wins. They've played in the Big 12, and they've dominated those teams. Arizona was ranked at the beginning of the season. They haven't looked great so far. They won that game 41-19. They beat Baylor 34-28 in Baylor. They beat number 13 Kansas State 38-9. BYU has been dominant this year. I think them at 9 is an absolute joke. I think they should be above Indiana, Tennessee, Penn State, and Texas. I would have BYU at 5 with these current rankings. I think this team has played a really difficult schedule so far, and they've dominated. I know no one's talking about the UCF game because UCF isn't a great team this year. They won that game 37-24. They were 3-point underdogs in the Bounce House down in Orlando, Florida as an undefeated team. No one is giving BYU any respect. They've played a difficult schedule, and no one's even talking about them being underrated. Everyone's focusing on Indiana, who, should they deserve more respect? Maybe, but you at least have the argument that they haven't played a difficult schedule, and that justifies the 8th ranking. I don't see the argument for BYU at 9. I certainly don't see the argument for them below Indiana, and I think I can make an argument for them above all those one-loss teams.
So I misunderstood the graphic real quick. I was looking at the seeding with these teams because one with the graphic that had originally come out, and you have that up. Good.
Yes, sir.
So I was looking at the seeding in the quarterfinal round, like with the 1, 2, 3, and 4. I didn't notice the graphic over there on the far left. So they did the college football playoff rankings, but then they seeded them after. Okay. That's on me. I misunderstood how they did that. Okay.
It's a tough thing that people are going to have to remember is that the number next to your name in the ranking is not your seed. So as these continue to progress, we're going to see number 9 BYU playing this week. They are the 4 seed. So you're going to have to kind of do a dual screen action here and look at the bracket along with the rankings to figure out where everyone lies.
Yeah, that threw me off. I was confused. So when you said BYU, I'm like, what the hell are you mad about? They're number 4. No, they're not number 4. They're number 9.
And just being 3 spots above BYU or Boise State is crazy to me. You've won 2 ranked games in a Power 4 conference, and they're basically saying it's a coin flip whether you or the Mountain West champions going to get that bye.
Elliot, I cut you off. My bad.
No, I was just going to say, do you think that the rankings, and I don't know, and this is where college football loses me, when the rankings come out and the playoff committee assigns the seed in this tournament, are they basing it off the rankings? Are they like? Because my question would be if they knew BYU as of this very second ahead of Boise, That's all that would really matter in that case, because you get the 4 seed,
Correct.
which looks good for your program anyway. So them being ranked 9 theoretically doesn't really matter because you're getting rewarded with that auto bye. Now, obviously, once Boise and BYU get a little bit closer, it's 12-9 right now, as you guys said, but I feel like that might have had something to do with it. But again, I don't know how that works. It confuses me.
So the buys, those 4 gold numbers, 1 through 4 there in the quarterfinals, go to the 4 highest ranked conference champions, regardless of conference. So you're right, the 9 and 12 doesn't really matter. I think the thing that people are focused on is what I just said, though, is how close they are. With Boise State already losing and playing in a worse conference, they're saying that basically a 1-loss Boise State and an undefeated BYU is separated by not a whole lot, which leads me to believe a 1-loss Big 12 champion BYU, assuming they don't go undefeated the whole way, is going to be below a 1-loss Boise State if undefeated only gives them this much spread. Obviously, it's searching for things to talk about in a first playoff ranking that's weeks and weeks away from the actual thing that matters. I mean, let's remember in 2014, the number 1 team in the first rankings was Mississippi State, led by Dak Prescott, and everyone thought that they were a shoe-in to the playoff and national championship favorites. They didn't even make the playoff. So these rankings can change drastically. There's many, many big games that have to be played. More big games now than ever because of the 12-team playoff. And the wins and losses at the bottom of the conference can affect the buys and stuff drastically because of conference record and shared opponent. With the round-robin scheduling in the Big Ten SEC, there's a lot of teams that don't play each other at the top of these conferences. So we're going to have to focus on tiebreakers and common opponents and things along those lines, which is absolutely crazy.
I tell you what, I mean, look at those. Jake, if you pop that back up on the screen, right? So, this is what's cool about the playoff. I don't, the 12-team playoff I was against coming in because I thought it just watered down matchups. Like Ohio State, Oregon, the loser of that game in the 14 playoff. I'm not saying that their season was done, but it would have been on life support at that point. Obviously, Ohio State, Penn State play a couple weeks later. Had Ohio State lost to Penn State, they're still probably in the playoff hunt right now. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You want your big your big brands to make sure you give them as much of a shot as possible to represent their conferences in these playoffs. But it just takes the urgency away from the regular season. But regular season be damned, if this is what we get when it's all said and done, like let's say this was the final one, can you imagine these matchups, not just in bowl game situations, because the bowl game situations are great. Okay, cool, whatever, at those locations. But for Ohio State at the shoe to welcome in Boise State in Ashton GT, how cool would that be? Tennessee and Indiana. I mean, for Texas to host Alabama, I know it's an SEC matchup now, but for Alabama to have to go on the road to Texas, or if Ohio State had to go play at Alabama or vice versa, can you imagine that these matchups that we never get to see really in the regular season are going to be these heavyweight matchups, these heavyweight showdowns? That part I cannot wait for. I think that's going to be the most magical part about all of this. I don't like how much it watered down the regular season, but I do love the concept of Alabama having to go to Texas, Notre Dame at Penn State. Imagine if that's a night game and you get the whiteout in a playoff game. Holy smokes, especially with how cold it's going to be at that time. Ohio State, Boise, Tennessee, Indiana, I'm all for it. I can't wait to get to that point. I just hate how much the regular season just seems to be. Alabama's not as good this year. Oh, well. Ohio State, they could have lost to Penn State. Oh, well. That part, not a fan of, but these matchups will make it all worth it.
I think those first-round games at the stadiums, at the college stadiums, is going to be great. That's been one of my main gripes with college football for a long, long time, is that we play these long seasons, 12 seasons, at these meccas to the sport. Beautiful, beautiful stadiums. And then we throw the biggest games of the year in warehouses in Houston, Texas. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You have the Rose Bowl, the Big House, the Shoe, Bryant-Denny, Jordan-Hare, Sanford Stadium in Georgia. Beautiful, beautiful stadiums all around the country that you play these marquee games at for 12, 13, 14 weeks. And then you go to the biggest game of the season and you put it in some warehouse that was built in 2020. It's ridiculous to me. I love that they're sprinkling in a little bit of tradition into the playoffs. I know it's all about getting bigger crowds and stadiums and TV deals and how all the cameras are run and presentation and all that stuff. It's bigger than just football. I like that at least for one step of this 12-team playoff, it seems that they put the football product first. And putting those first-round games at the home college stadiums is the greatest thing that they did, and I'm incredibly excited for it. As an Ohio State fan, I would love to go see Ashton Jeanty play in Columbus. I think that would be absolutely amazing in the first round of the playoff. One thing I did want to ask, I'll throw this graphic right back up there. What do you guys think is the best spot to be in the playoff to win a national championship? Because I think there's a very clear answer, and I think it's the 5th seed.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to play the 12 and then have to play
the
4.
group of 5 team and then the worst conference champion, and then you might not even have to play the 1 in the semifinals because they have to play the 8-9, and just looking right now, that's certainly not going to be an easy game. I think the number 5 seed has the easiest path to the semifinals of any team, which is crazy to say. If Ohio State was undefeated right now, would it be beneficial for them to lose to Oregon in the Big Ten Championship? I guess the easier way to say that right now, would it be beneficial for Oregon to lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship? Ohio State would get the 1 seed, presumably, get that first round bye, play in the quarterfinal against the winner of the 8-9 matchup. Oregon would then play the group of 5 team and then worst conference champion. I think we're going to see teams maybe strategize around that conference championship game and not necessarily play to win. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to rest starters or anything along those lines, but I don't think those conference championship games are nearly as make or break as some people say, because that 5 seed is beautiful to lay in if you're a really good football team. The one thing that you do have to risk then, all the other conference champion losing spots are terrible. If you're not a conference champion and you don't get that first round bye and you're not the 5 seed, you are in hell for this 12-team playoff. So you have to be sure about where you're going to land. But I think that 5 seed is the best place to be in for this new 12-team playoff, which is certainly interesting because for all the history of college football, it's always been conference champions are what you want to be. And I don't know that that's the case anymore.
Yeah, like I would hate to be the 4 seed.
Yeah.
The 4 seed every year. Because think about it, you look at it as though you just have to play the 5, but sometimes I think the 5 could potentially be better than that 4th conference champion, especially when you talk about how bad the ACC is most years, how bad the Big 12 is going to be for a while. I mean, you took Oklahoma and Texas out. I know there's some good teams in the Big 12, but BYU is a prime example. That's a good football team. But I think that there are teams who are seated below them that are significantly better. And, Alabama, BYU, Alabama's better than, in my opinion. I would take Alabama, Ohio State. There's so many teams below them. That's the only reason I wasn't a fan of awarding it to the conference champion right off the bat, because you're still not positioning the best teams. But again, it put value back on the conference championship. But Elliot, closing thoughts on the playoff before we move on to buy or sell?
Well, I was going to say before Jacob started that, Ohio State by far is the easiest path.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even remotely close. I know Jacob kind of hyped up, Boise and certainly BYU, but there's not a better spot there than that spot. It's the easiest path by a wide margin. I guess if you wanted to argue, obviously being the 1 seed in the country helps, or being the number 1 team in the country would help, I guess. But even then, I just don't think that's the easiest path. And I don't think Georgia as the 2 seed has the easiest path. I think it's very clearly you'd have to play an extra game, but Ohio State is, in my opinion, would have the easiest path to the finals by a wide margin.
No doubt. It'll be fun. And I'm curious to see again. And we'll, on tomorrow, moving forward, we'll take a look at some of the matchups in college football this week that'll have the biggest impact on the rearrangement of this for the next reveal coming up next Tuesday night.
There's a play-in game this week. There's a play-in game this week. Alabama goes to Baton Rouge. One of those 2 teams is going to go to the playoff, and one of those 2 teams is not. And it's the winner of this game this week. It's going to be crazy.
There you go. I mean, I guess from that perspective, we are getting more high-meaning games late in the season as opposed to being out of the 4-team race.
Then, yeah.
Yeah. But all right, we'll step away for a few seconds. We'll be right back. More off the bench next. A little buy sell. Cincinnati Bengals. I think I have Jermaine Burton on here. Let's see. Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson. I have them involved. Nick Martinez and Joey Votto. Yeah, we have a fun one. We'll be right back. More buy or sell next. All right, let's get to it. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Little buy or sell action right off the bat. So I'm going to throw it to you guys. Buy or sell? We're off and rolling here on a Wednesday. Buy or sell? Jermaine Burton will turn things around and be a dependable weapon for Joe Burrow and the Bengals moving forward.
You threw a word in there that really throws me off. Can I just buy or sell whether he's going to be a weapon for the Bengals?
You arrange it however you'd like.
He's not going to be dependable. He certainly will not be dependable. This is going to be something we have to watch all season long. How he's doing, just whether he's at practice or not, is going to be an interesting topic as we progress through the rest of the season. I do think he's going to make a difference in a game or 2 games or 3 games or a handful of games at some point this season. He already has. I mean, those 2 games where he has the 1 catch or 40-plus yards, he was the second leading receiver in one of those games. I'm going to choose to buy it because I know what the upside is, and I hope he can figure it out. Jamar Chase said yesterday that he missed a meeting his rookie year as well. Didn't result in a suspension for him. It resulted in a 200-yard receiving game, which is still statistically the best game of his career. But I digress. I guess it's different when you're a generational talent versus a third-round pick with character issues. Hopefully, Jermaine Burton can figure it out. I'm going to buy that he's a crucial piece to this offense, so I'm going to buy that he can and becomes a weapon for this team.
Yeah, I'm not going to proclaim to be the most mature person in the world. I'm certainly a kid at heart. That's how I define myself. But Jermaine Burton's a child, and you can't hope to depend on a child to win football games. I'm not rooting against Jermaine Burton. I've seen in 2 games when Jermaine Burton's been out there, he's been good enough to help the Cincinnati Bengals. But he's a child, and he's not going to show up to practice, and he's coming to the game wearing pajamas. And then after all of that, we're just going to go to the casino and have some fun. It's just it's all a bad look, and it's a guy that unfortunately we knew this was going to be a problem. It's become a problem. It's been a problem, and now you have to live with the consequences. No, I'm going to sell. Jermaine Burton will not be a key contributor for the Bengals. Maybe he makes a couple more big catches down the stretch here. But I don't see that working. I think the coaching staff is starting to get annoyed with it. And I'm concerned too that, usually people operate on the 3-strike policy. I don't know how many strikes he's at. By the looks of this, it seems like he's past the 3-strike counter. And 1 more strike, and who knows where Jermaine Burton is in this organization. Because you certainly would think that after all of this noise that has happened over the last week, he won't miss anymore, right? He's going to be dependable. He's going to be that guy that you drafted. He's going to be the guy that you hope to take over the number 2 spot when T. Higgins leaves in the offseason. But you can't realistically count on it, and for that reason, no, I'm going to sell this. He's not going to be a key contributor for the Bengals. He's not going to be dependable.
You didn't say this year, right, Kinner?
I just said moving forward throughout his career.
Oh, yeah.
And for those who just buy or sell, Jermaine Burton will turn things around and be a dependable weapon for Joe Burrow and the Bengals throughout his career. And both of you sold it.
I'm buying it for career.
No. Yeah, Jacob bought it for career. I think that Jermaine Burton, as of this moment, if I can't count on him this year, and we don't have T. Higgins next year, you have to draft a wide receiver. That guy then would jump Jermaine Burton, and by that point, we don't know where Jermaine Burton is in the depth chart. So that's the whole reason I'm selling this, is because if you can't depend on him this year, it means you're going to have to find his replacement next year. And by the time Jermaine Burton figures it out how to be a pro, I don't know where he's going to be in the depth chart rankings.
Yeah, I think right now I'm going to sell the hell out of this, mainly because, look, the red flag when he was drafted was just the obviously all the issues that we're seeing unfold here. But the thing is, it's not like he played at some small college that, the talent, overwhelms people, and that's how he got noticed. Yeah. And he never played for a true, authoritarian head coach. He couldn't find a way to play for Nick Saban. He couldn't find a way to play for Kirby Smart. Like he couldn't get done under 2 of the best head coaches in all of college football. If you can't play for those guys, if you can't get it together on a team that's led by Joe Burrow with veterans around that have, with Super Bowl aspirations, if you can't get it done at this point, I think by the time maybe you do get it figured out, it's going to be too late. So again, can he get it figured out for his NFL career? Maybe, but I don't think with the Bengals. Look, you already have Jamar Chase coming out and saying, yeah, I've given him advice once. I'm not going to keep telling you not to do the same things over and over. Joe Burrow, really went out on a limb for him last week. We talked last week, Jacob, about how strange it was that Joe Burrow spent so much time in the press conference. You had your guy go to bat for you. If Joe Burrow going to bat for you like that, spent that much time in a press conference, couldn't get you to turn things around, I don't think anything will. He might turn it around in the NFL at some point. Another team takes a flyer out on him. I just don't think he's going to be around in Cincinnati long enough. It seems like his teammates are already getting tired of him. I don't even know if he makes it throughout the entire rookie contract with the Bengals. We'll see. But with how much they value draft picks, they will not move on from draft picks at all. To waste one in the third round, and it hasn't been wasted yet, it's trending that way, that'd be a huge concern, considering the talent he has, no doubt. But, all right, moving on, buy or sell. Buy or sell, guys, that the defense for the Bengals will be too much for this team to overcome moving forward without making a move at the deadline, of course. Buy or sell, the defense for the Bengals will be too much for this team to overcome deficiency-wise.
I'm going to buy that as long as we are talking in the context of preseason plans. Super Bowl, 1 seed, division, absolutely too big of a hurdle for this team to overcome. I firmly believe that they can overcome it in order to make the playoffs. And at that point, it's a coin flip and you can go on a run. Who knows? I think preseason expectations, absolutely buying that this defense is too big of a hurdle for the Bengals to overcome and get to that point. I think we've already seen a lot of those hopes fly out the window.
Yeah, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell it as of this very second. I think if you have the mentality where we're going to score 40 points a game, I know it's easier said than done, but the defense has had good games this season. They completely shut down the Giants. I know we lost the Patriots game. They shut them down. The Kansas City Chiefs, believe it or not, were shut down in that game. You lost that game because of a fumble six and a kind of questionable pass interference call. There's been games there. The Cleveland Browns were shut down completely. There's been games where the defense has showed up. It's just about when they show up, when they decide to be there. And if you can find the perfect storm, if you can find the perfect storm with the defense playing their best and the offense playing their best, just kind of like it was in the first half of that Ravens game. I know in the second half it was a disgrace, but there was moments, at least in the first half of that Ravens game, where I thought the defense was playing pretty damn good football. I think there's enough of those moments to help the Bengals offense just enough to get hot, get into the playoffs, and maybe go on a run. Once you get to the playoffs, you throw everything out the window and everything starts. You're 0-0 and the season's just begun. So that's where I'm kind of at. The defense isn't good, and we knew that coming in, and we know it certainly now through 8 weeks, 9 weeks. But I do think Joe Burrow and the offense, if they're able to stay healthy, if the offensive line's able to be out there, if we still have Mike Gesicki, if T. Higgins is able to come back at some point, that would be nice. Joe Burrow does not get injured at some point during this season. Joe Burrow is having arguably the best season of his career. I think there's enough there where the Bengals have the juice, have the magic to go on a little bit of a run. I'm going to buy the fact or sell it. I honestly forget the question. I think the Bengals can overcome the defense. I think the Bengals offense can overcome that defense and then go on a run.
The other thing that's important to look at as we progress forward for this Bengals defense is they might not have to overcome this defense. After this Ravens game, there's not an elite offense on this schedule unless you count the Dallas Cowboys. Following the Ravens, you have the Chargers, Steelers, Cowboys, Titans, Browns, Broncos, Steelers again. None of those offenses are the Ravens, the Eagles, the Commanders, the Chiefs. You don't play that level of offense again, and it seems like the Cowboys could potentially be without Dak Prescott, which certainly scares me a little bit more because we know how Cooper Rush plays against the Bengals. But outside of that one, it seems like this defense is going to have opportunity after opportunity after opportunity this year to play those less than average offenses and prove that they are not the worst defense in the league. Because if you're a top 20 defense, you can make most of those offenses look pretty poor. So they just need to get to a level where they were at against, honestly, where they've been at for the last few weeks, other than that Eagles game. Yeah. The output against the Raiders, Browns, and Giants is exactly what we're going to have to do against the Titans, Browns, Broncos. Like, we play those levels of teams again. You just have to be able to shut down that level of offense.
Yeah, the buy or sell, the defensive deficiencies for the Bengals will be too much for this team to overcome. Jake, you bring up a good point. If you're basing it off the expectations for this team coming in, you buy it. I'm going to base it off of that. I don't think this team's good enough to win a Super Bowl because of that defense. To be fair, I don't think the Ravens are good enough to win a Super Bowl because of that defense, too. It's not like I'm picking on your Bengals. I'm not putting any money on the Ravens. I don't care how good Lamar is. I don't care how good Derrick Henry has been. I compared them earlier. Their identity is on the offensive side of the ball, and all their restrictions come on the defensive side. The Ravens aren't a Super Bowl contender because of that, and that's why I can't put the Bengals in that category either. I do think they are good enough to win enough games throughout the regular season to sneak into that wild card spot when it's all said and done. Outside of I know they've had success against Patrick Mahomes, but the problem, yes, to get through the regular season, but to win a Super Bowl, you're going to run into Lamar, you're going to run into C.J. Stroud, you're going to run into Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or maybe even a Justin Herbert in the postseason. That's why I don't like the Bengals' chances, not because I don't think Joe Burrow and Jamar are good enough. It's because that defense is so bad that I think it could be picked apart. We watched what happened when they played a good quarterback a few weeks ago in Philadelphia. It wasn't good. We'll see what they have in store for the final couple months in the back half of the season. So
I will say, the Eagles game, I know it was tough and the defense certainly couldn't get a stop. The offense was also abysmal in that game. I like that's where I kind of differentiate. Shout out to me for not being able to say that word. I do think there's a difference, though, when the offense isn't able to get the job done, and then the defense at some point in the second half of that game was like, all right, there's no point. I do think that's a factor. I'm not saying the defense is good by any means, and they especially weren't good in that game. I'm just saying that my takeaway from the Eagles game is the offense looked inept rather than the defense looked bad, which we already know. Go ahead. Sorry, though.
Why are you apologizing for talking on your show? It's all our show. With a slight delay, everyone's stepping on everyone. New rule, no one apologize for interrupting. So there you go. But Elliot, in the studio, you jump in there. You got to jump in there. I'm just saying.
I feel like when I jump in, like you have a take, and by the time we figure it out, you know what it's like right now. It's like when you get to a stop sign at the same time with another car. And you're just like, no, you go. And then they're like, no, you go. And then you're flashing your lights. And then by the time each one of you decide to take the first step, your third car's already gone. Yeah, the third car's already gone. But then the two cars that are stopped, you guys are both going at the same time. So now you got to redo it again. Okay, now you go. Now you go. So that's what we're at right now with this Zoom call or whatever the hell this is.
So we're gonna turn this FaceTime type show here on YouTube. We're gonna turn it into a roundabout. Everyone just go at the same time, and if we crash, we crash. How about that?
I love that.
Right. We'll continue on more off the bench, buy or sell when we come back. All right, welcome back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We wrap things up here on the radio side, of course, a little buy or sell action. Buy or sell will continue on in the NFL. Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson will remain with their current teams heading into next season. Buy or sell?
Ooh. Both?
Yeah.
Both.
Are you saying like
both of them are yeah. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it. I think Anthony Richardson is a no-doubt stone-cold lock to stay on the Colts. No question in my mind. I think he's going to start again this season. I know Shane Steichen said that Flacco's their guy and they're rocking with him the rest of the year. I don't believe it. I think Anthony Richardson will start again this year. I certainly think he'll start week 1. Bryce Young just won the game for the Panthers. And we're going to bench him for Andy Dalton again? What does Andy Dalton give you? I think Dave Canales might be public enemy number 1 because I love Bryce Young and he is setting him up for failure every step along the way. I don't get it. I hope they stick with him. I hope they put some pieces around him. I'm going to buy it because I don't know how you go off of Bryce Young the rest of this year. And if you play him the rest of the season, you have to keep him next year. So I'm going to buy this. I think they both stay and they both start by week 1 next year.
I'm going to sell. I think the Panthers are going to be drafting a quarterback. And by the time they do that, there will be a trade for Bryce Young. There will be some team in the NFL that is looking at Bryce Young as someone they can maybe can build off of. Who is what? Who's the team that's going to do it? I don't know yet. I think maybe the Raiders. Like if you're a team like the Raiders, if you're a bad team like that, maybe you try to get a quarterback in there. I don't know. As of right now, I do think that Bryce Young, that relationship in Carolina is gone. It's over, and I don't think you can really fix it. It's a disaster there. I don't know who to really blame because I understood benching Bryce Young at the beginning of the season because he was so bad. He was absolutely horrific. You bring in Andy Dalton to maybe give you a spark. He gave you one game of a spark against a terrible Raiders team. Outside of that, he's been terrible. Now you go back to Bryce Young. He's looked okay. He's looked fine enough. He's been a large reason as to why they're somewhat able to score points. But that relationship has been severed. The Anthony Richardson is a different story. I think if the Colts end up, the Colts thing is going to depend on how they finish this year. If the Colts make the playoffs, if they're able to be good, Anthony Richardson's going to be with the Colts long term. He's going to start next season. There's no doubt about it. If the Colts start losing games here, if the Colts start going down in a free fall, I do think there's a chance the Colts look to make a move at quarterback. They'll see what they can get for Anthony Richardson and maybe start thinking about drafting a quarterback. It's very likely Richardson's going to stay in Indianapolis, and this is just a wild take I have. But I do think that if they lose out, if they start losing games by the busload, it doesn't make sense to believe in Anthony Richardson when you didn't believe in him in a losing season. So I'm going to sell. I think both these quarterbacks could be on new teams next year.
But so you do think Anthony Richardson's going to start for the Colts the rest of this year? Or do you mean they lose with Flacco and then move off Richardson?
Correct. I'm going to say if they lose with Joe Flacco and they lose out here and they never go back to Anthony Richardson in a losing season like this, I think that relationship's gone and I think it's over. And I think they're going to get rid of him. I think if they're good this year with Joe Flacco, that buys Anthony Richardson more time there.
I'm in the exact opposite boat.
Really?
Yeah. I think if Flacco proves this roster's ready to rock, then they're more inclined to go get a quarterback next year. If they're losing, no matter who they put at quarterback, they give AR more time. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about moving off. If Flacco starts the rest of the year and they lose and they move off Richardson, you're moving off a top 5 pick with 10 starts. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's nuts, and it's a bad pick. But at this point, if you're not going to believe in your guy,
you're right.
You knew what. Similarly to Jermaine Burton, you know what Anthony Richardson was. You knew it when you drafted him. He didn't play a ton of games, and in those games, he didn't complete a ton of passes at a high percentage. You knew that, Indianapolis. So now you're going to have to live with those consequences as Joe Flacco either keeps your season afloat or he kills it. Either way, you're not believing in your quarterback that you drafted with the problems that you knew he had coming into the year. So this is all on the Colts. We'll see if they ride with him.
The team I would love Bryce Young to go to if he does get moved is the Rams. I think he'd be phenomenal behind Stafford for a year. Yeah. Sliding in that McVay offense, I think he'd be great. But I do think he stays in Carolina.
So yesterday there was a report, Sports Illustrated, Evan Massey, again, covers the Cleveland Browns. And I'm not advocating for this. I'm just repeating an article that the headline says the Browns were urged to pursue an Anthony Richardson trade. Because if the Colts were willing to move on, the Browns wouldn't have to give up much to get him. And there you go. Again, he's the same type of build that would fit the Kevin Stefanski system and has the potential, this, that, and the other. I just think the Browns are in a situation where it would not make sense to try and take on another project. They are in a win-now mode. But no, with that, I think both are still with their teams heading into next season. I just think both have to. I think both are similar. I don't think they were benched for their careers. I think both needed to be benched at the time that they were benched just because they weren't playing very good football at all. And I think it's a situation where they can get out. I think they need to see one more time, one more full camp, one more preseason, one more start to a season. The Panthers ain't winning blank next year anyways. The Colts are always that wild card type of team to begin with. I think the Panthers are going to be more patient, though, than the Colts because the Colts have an owner that just wants to win and win now. I think that's one reason why the Flacco thing has been pushed on them as much as it has.
Could the Panthers respond to that?
Strong? Take my camera off real quick. I got to plug this laptop in, but answer that well.
Will do. Just give me 1 second and I'll get it off there.
My bad.
No, all good. All good. Yeah. I think the thing that's interesting about the Panthers is I feel like they could potentially get strong-armed into moving off of Bryce Young just based on where they might end up picking and where the draft board falls. We have a rare opportunity here with the draft that the best player in the draft, really consensus, is not a quarterback. It's Travis Hunter. So if the Jaguars are picking one or another team with a quarterback already taken care of is picking number one, then you might not see a quarterback go, which means those top quarterbacks could fall down to the Panthers. If their top quarterback pick on their personal board is still on the board at the time they're picking, whether that's 2, 3, or 4, or 5, 6, or 7, if they're able to rip off wins, I think both is possible because not only is this board very interesting with where the good players lie outside of the quarterback position, but the quarterback position is very, very bunched up. There's not a very clear 1, 2, 3, 4 in quarterbacks. Everyone kind of has their pick and choose. I wouldn't be so surprised if the Panthers move off of Bryce Young, not necessarily by choice, but just because that's how the board falls and they like the quarterback better than anyone else, and they might as well just make the change.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know. Both are in those situations where everyone just wants to win now.
Yeah.
You know, the CJ Strouds of the world, and obviously the Jaden Daniels, it's not ruined it, but it's put this false hope that, hey, that's the expectation now. I remember that's what we were talking about with Caleb Williams, about the pressure that he faces, about, will people be patient with him if he doesn't get off to a hot start? I said, well, whether it's right or wrong, I didn't think so, because he's been touted as this generational type quarterback coming out of the draft, and you saw what CJ Stroud did, and anything less than what CJ Stroud did will be considered less than, only because of the expectations for him coming in. Right. But it's not just him, it's everyone when it's all said and done. But continuing on here again, I know we only have a little bit left here, but let's move over to the Cincinnati Reds. We talked about it yesterday that the Cincinnati Reds, of course, they did counter with the qualifying offer to Nick Martinez with the $21 million deal. Buy or sell, Nick Martinez will accept the Reds' $21 million qualifying offer. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell. I think that there were talks of an extension. I don't think he wanted to be here long term. I will say at $21 million, I don't know who's offering Nick Martinez more than that. I think that's a reasonable price for a guy for a hybrid pitcher for one season. I think that's more than a fair price. If I was Nick Martinez, I'd be all over it, saying that I think he's waiting to see the best offer available. And usually when you're in the baseball world, the Reds never have the best offer available. So I'm going to sell the fact that he's going to be here next year and that he accepts that. But I do think there's a sizable chance that he might be back. I think there's a non-zero chance that he returns, because again, what's the max that Nick Martinez is worth? A 3-year, $23 million, like $25 million a year for Nick Martinez can't be the asking price. He can't possibly be asking that. So I'm going to say it's going to be right around the $21 million, and it just depends, I'd imagine, whether or not he likes Cincinnati and likes the situation that Terry Francona brings in here for next season. I imagine that has something to do with it. Maybe he wants to be on a winning team and be that hybrid type of pitcher. I don't know. But $21 million is more than a fair price, more than a fair offer to what he did last season. But nonetheless, he'll go to the Dodgers.
I'm going to buy Nick Martinez taking the qualifying offer. I think that $20 million is, like you said, Elliot, probably about the ceiling for what a guy like him is going to get. I don't know if that's looking at him as a reliever, which is how I think most teams would view him, is as a long relieving type of guy. This seems to me like the Reds are viewing him as a starter. And I think for a $20 million qualifying offer, if he takes that, he's probably going to be at least a hybrid role, probably starting some games. I think he would love that $20 million after a great year he had last year. Craig makes a great point in our chat saying that he thinks Martinez probably would prefer a longer-term deal than just the 1 year, parlaying that success from last year into a multi-year deal as he is nearing probably the end of his career. Might be a smart move financially for Nick Martinez, but $20 million, I just don't know if any other teams are going to be offering that. Maybe they will. I don't know entirely. That's more of a Nick Kirby question if he's in our chat. But I would assume that that's certainly towards the top end, and I think he'll take it.
The one X factor, and I see some people in the chat too bring up, I think Colton said it, $21 million, and they get to play for Tito. He goes, sign me up. I think, look, I do think Francona is a very interesting piece that might play a role in the trust level. Like when Nick Martinez trusts coming back to the Reds if they didn't, get Tito to be the coach or the manager. Like, you know what I mean? Like if they didn't get Terry Francona to come in to manage this team, there's going to be some players that now trust this organization more than what they did before just because of that signing. So with that, I think I'm a little hesitant to buy it because he was so dominant down the stretch that I think had he just been good all season and not dominant, I think he signs the qualifying offer to come back. But because he was dominant, he might bet on himself and try to test the market and see what he can get out there. So I'm going to sell it just because I think right now, is he going to be able to replicate those numbers again to where he can gamble on himself to go to Cincinnati for 1 year, get that 21 mil, play for Francona, put up the same numbers, and then explode in free agency next year? I don't know. That's a big gamble for him. I could see him kind of seeing what's out there. Other teams, what we consider a lot in Cincinnati may not be a lot to somewhere else. And even if it's a couple million more, may not be a lot to another team. It's a lot to Cincinnati. We'll see what ends up happening.
It would probably be the biggest signing, or at least up there, if it's a $20 million annual value. I don't know that the Reds are going to go much higher than that on any free agent. So certainly a big one to watch as this offseason progresses.
Next up, I mean, look, the last guy that they spent that kind of money on, Mr. Joey Votto, of course. It was cool to kind of see reports out of, the Cincinnati Reds that they're trying to find a way to get Joey Votto to come be a part of the Reds organization in some capacity. We discussed yesterday what capacity could that potentially be in the front office, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is Nick Krall saying this to get him to come to the organization. You know that Votto makes the most sense, in the interaction with the players and passing on that type of wisdom. Obviously, on the staff in some capacity would make a lot of sense. But big picture here, buy or sell, Joey Votto will be a manager in Major League Baseball someday. Buy or sell?
I'm gonna sell it. I don't think he'll ever be a manager. I don't think you'll see Joey Votto manage a team. But I think he'll be a coach. I think he'll be a part of organizations going forward. But I don't see him in that role as of right now. It's just, for me, I don't see it yet. Maybe one day in the future, in like 5 years, 10 years down the line, I'll see that vision. But as of right now, I don't see him ever leading a franchise, leading an organization. But I do think he's going to be hitting coach. I think he's going to be, if you want to say, a bench coach, maybe a first base coach, third base coach. He's going to be a coach in baseball for a long time. I think that's more than fair. I would like to see him be a broadcaster, if we're going to be honest. That's where I would want to see Joey shine. And whatever this new TV deal is with the Reds, I'd love Joey Votto to be a part of that. I think his knowledge of the game is bar none, and I think he's entertaining. I think when you see guys make fun of his little TikTok career, I won't mention names who makes fun of him for that, but when you see people do that, he's able to entertain people. And I think that's forward into 162 game baseball broadcasts. Somebody that can, spread knowledge of the game, which he's more than able to do, and somebody that's able to make a big call, make a call exciting. I think, despite what I think of John Sadak, I think he's able to engage with fans. I think he's able to make that big moment call. And I think Joey would be a great guy to sit right next to him in the future, depending on whatever the hell happens with these TV broadcasts. But no, I'm going to sell the fact that he's a manager as of right now.
Yeah.
One point you brought.
Go for it, Kenner.
The point that Elliot brought up yesterday, and I'm mad because I had it in my notes and I kind of forgot to check my notes as we got into that talking point, and I completely forgot. I said yesterday that the one thing that we didn't really consider when we talked about Nick Krall saying that they were trying to get Joey Votto to come back and be involved in the organization somehow, the one thing not one of us mentioned yesterday was that could still mean, from a media perspective, that still could mean an ambassador role that a lot of former Reds are a part of. I mean, that's how Barry Larkin, who was, kind of making his way through the system, that's how it kind of got mentioned. That's kind of how it built to his name being thrown out there to manage this team or in Major League Baseball in some capacity at some point. Could Joey Votto follow that route? Possibly. But I think the one that makes the most sense, too, is the media route. Could he be involved with the Reds organization from a TV/radio standpoint? That would be phenomenal because, as a fan, him being a hitting coach, cool, whatever. You see him in the dugout, the clubhouse from time to time, oh well. But to hear him and just the way he interacts, whether it's media, whether it's TV, radio, I think he crushes it. I would love to see him in that role more than anything else. But Jacob, buy or sell?
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. I would certainly love to see him in the booth. I'm going to sell it for a lot of the same reasons Elliot did. I think he's going to be a coach in baseball. He's going to be involved in the game in some degree. Maybe it is a broadcaster, not a coach, but he'll be involved in the game of baseball probably for the majority of the rest of our lives. I don't think Joey Votto is going to be out of baseball for very long following this retirement. I would expect him back, whether it's on the network. I mean, maybe not even with the Reds. He's done all those MLB network hits over the years, and he certainly kills those. Maybe he goes big time and gets on one of those big networks. I think he's one of the best ambassadors for the game of baseball that we've seen in a long time. He's great with fans. He's great with media. He's a great person on and off the field. I think he's going to be great in whatever lane that he goes in. I would lean away from him being a manager. I just don't think that necessarily aligns with the way that I think he wants to do. I think he'd be a great hitting coach or something along those lines if I had to guess, but certainly the media route is what I would like to see him in. He'll be involved in baseball. I just don't think as a manager, so I'll sell that.
All right, yeah, I'm going to sell that as well, at least as far as anytime soon. I mean, could that be a thing that as he gets older and ventures down that? Absolutely. You know, to have him involved in the clubhouse right away as a hitting coach, I mean, that's going to be a Francona thing, and I don't think that you throw him directly into that role. But we see companies make up titles all the time, to get people on the, on the payroll, and they figure it out from there. But no, media. Elliot brought up a great point. I think media. Because, like I said, it wasn't like Terry Francona put out there that, hey, we're trying to find a way to get Joey Votto involved back with the organization. If he had said it, my mind right away would be like, oh, yeah, it's going to be some kind of hitting coach or some instructor or something along those lines. But the fact that Nick Krall said it, to me, that seems more of a business side of things. And I don't see it as front office. I see it more as potential media. Elliot, that's a good point. Hopefully that is the case. But we're out of time. We're out of time here today. But we'll be back in the studio tomorrow, back and rolling?
We think. We think.
We hope.
That's a Kinner guarantee, because we know those don't really mean anything. So we'll Kinner guarantee that we'll be back in the studio tomorrow.
Yeah, the guarantees always run pretty well for me. So there you go. All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week, of course. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
We're going to do box lunch at 12:30. We're out of radio here. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Elliot and I will be back in right about half hour for box lunch. So if you're a member, make sure you stick around or come back for that. We'll do box lunch later today. If you're not a member, that gives you about half hour to subscribe. So go ahead and click that join, become a member here at Chatterbox, and join box lunch later today. We'll be back with you for that. But that's going to do it today. Hopefully back in the studio tomorrow. Hopefully. We'll see.
I wonder what we're gonna talk about on Box Lunch.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out. You have to be a member to find out.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, sorry, I was interrupting. My bad.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Elliot. All right. Have a good day.